of the Minnesota Twins. So to joining us here, locked upon with the Minnesota Twins, Brandon Warne joining us. Well, you heard it from my newest co-host here up on the show that Cleveland Guardians, they've got the pick. It's interesting to see how the MLB draft, because this is the month now that we're kicking off where we've got the All-Star Game, the Futures Game, and we've got the MLB Draft. And so I thought we had a very fun College World Series, like to kind of sum it up. But when you think about it, with the state of a lot of these prospects and what we're going to expect to see coming up into the draft, I mean, what was kind of your takeaways when you saw this with the College World Series and what we're going to potentially expect come the draft?
Well, it's always fun to see how that stretch of play boosts guys, their standing, or vice versa if they have a tough stretch there. And it'll be interesting to see if the Guardians favor, Bazana at second base or Condon, or if they do go, sometimes you'll go below slot at number one overall and then kind of restructure your finances. I know they've got 3 picks in the top, something like 40 or something like that. So there is going to be an element of strategy there. And as someone who's watched a team that's selected first overall not that long ago, with Royce Lewis, who's been terrific here so far this season when he's been healthy, it's always going to be fun. It's exciting, but it's also nerve-wracking because you can't blow that pick. It's not often that a team is able to miss on a number one overall pick and not be sent into a spiral for 5 to 10 years. So we'll see what happens. It allows the Guardians to be in a really great place where they are one of the best teams in MLB and picking first overall. It's the exact opposite of the White Sox, who are the worst team in MLB and can't pick higher than 10th next year. So it's fun. I like that they've kind of curbed tanking that way, but I'm eager to see what this draft looks like now that it's in July instead of June.
Man, I have already gotten lucky with the fact of talking about the Guardians and now with the Twins. And then early on, I talked about, the Tigers. So I'm only missing the Royals and the White Sox. But do I really need to say more about the Chicago White Sox and what they're really going through this year? So what a story of Royce Lewis, eh? I mean, this guy, when we first saw him get drafted and coming in, I think there was a lot of promise for the near future. Now, we know his road, unlike a lot of prospects that have come into Major League Baseball and kind of callous to what they are right now. How impressed have you been with Royce Lewis, knowing the journey road that he's been in to like getting drafted into Major League Baseball and to what we're seeing potentially for the future, especially with the Minnesota Twins?
Well, and you can't forget that he had lost seasons to a couple of ACLs and also the COVID season of 2020. So his development has been extremely truncated. It's been extremely abbreviated, and he's still hit the ground running far more often than not. He did have, I think, a tough stretch there early on where, he wasn't hitting for much power. But regardless of where he sticks, whether it's third base, second base, I think shortstop's covered for a while in Minnesota. It's very easy to be excited about what he does. He just has that X factor, that level of excitement that every time he hits, it's must-watch TV. And, the Twins have that in Byron Buxton when he's healthy. And Carlos Correa with the heater he's been on lately as well has been must-watch TV. So it's kind of nice to have, 33+% of your lineup be guys who are really dialed in.
Yeah, and it's funny because, the thing that I looked at watching the Twins over the last few years, I've grown up a baseball kid myself, since I've been in diapers. So I've seen, the Twins at their best and at their worst, at the times when they had Jason Kubel, Michael Kadire, Joey Mauer, and Justin Morneau, even when they had Yohan Santana before going over to the Mets. When you watch this team, and for covering them as long as you have, they have kind of been the organization that I love pieces on their roster, but I'm always stuck with the big question of when and how are they going to get over some of their postseason humps? Because I love watching this team build the potentials they have with the prospects and even with these stars that they have right now. But when you're thinking of a deeper postseason run and further and beyond, there's got to be something in the cards from there, right?
Yeah, and I think it boils down to just reconfiguring some of the things that went sideways for the Twins last year. Carlos Correa had plantar fasciitis and was clearly a shadow of his former self. He's turned that back into a much better season this year. Lewis was clearly compromised with injury that he suffered late in the regular season, and Buxton barely even played. I think he had one plate appearance in the postseason, and it just was it's frustrating all around. And the Twins still broke that almost 20-year playoff streak of futility. But at the same time, you get out of the first round, that's great, and then you face a team in the Astros who's been there, who's done that, and has the experience to kind of step on your neck in October. And that's where you get that valuable experience facing those teams, because the Astros right now are not the Astros of years gone by. They've gotten back to 500 and they're pretty decent, but you have to be ready to be that next team to take that leap. And whether beating the Blue Jays in the postseason or losing to the Astros gave you more valuable experience, I'm not really sure, but I think they're both valuable as the Twins look to, defend their division crown, go to the postseason, and do what they can to run through the playoffs a little better than last year. Obviously, last year they got a lot of, pressure off themselves, but at the same time, they still want more.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about it, for the future and beyond. So we did get the rosters for both the American and the National League for the Futures game. And so Brooks Lee in this organization and in the farm system, this is a heck of a player that I think, the Minnesota Twins, they can't wait for him to get his call up coming into this, this organization. So having him up on the roster, plus he's also in the skills showcase participants. What are some things that you could definitely explain about Brooks Lee and what we should expect in the Futures game, and especially with his development in the farm system?
He's just very polished. There's not a real standout tool, with Byron Buxton. It's speed, and with Carlos Correa, he's got a rocket throwing arm and then does everything else pretty well. With Lee, it's just polish. A guy coming out of college goes high up there in the draft, but at the same time, the coach's kid. So he's got that inner baseball IQ that you love to have from from any player. And so I think at this point it's just some fine tuning things and staying healthy. The back issue that cost him the better part of the first 2 months, but as he does, he's hit the ground running and hit the batter's box swinging. So it's basically a matter of time until he gets to the big leagues. And I know a lot of Twins fans are hoping it's before the Futures game, but I don't think it's going to be. And so it'll be fun to watch him on that big stage, because we're all kind of itching to see what he's going to do up here. And so to see him on national television will be pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, when I start watching Futures games, I mean, I see a lot of big time potential players that I can't wait by the time that they get the official call. And sometimes you get those, those rookie September call ups. Maybe sometimes, you go through the season this year, and then potentially what next season comes spring training and what the start of the year really does, if you either do or you don't make the first team cuts usually. So I'm excited to see this with the Futures game. I think it's going to be very entertaining, and even for the All-Star game as a whole. When we have the All-Star game, and maybe a fun question as well, when you look at the All-Star game, my favorite festivities is, I love the home run derby. I think everybody does. But the other thing is, I watch what the NFL does with their showcases, with their skills. I'm almost thinking, Major League Baseball could definitely, induce something similar like that. Because, I mean, even when you get the relays challenge, you get kind of the accuracy pitching challenge, sometimes too, catcher block. Something like that. But when you look at all-star festivities, I mean, what are the big takeaways you kind of think about with all-star festivities?
I just think it's, as much as people don't like having every team represented, I still think it's good for the game to have, a member of the White Sox there, for instance. Obviously, Garrett Crochet would be deserving beyond deserving. So it's not like they'd be picking somebody out of a hat just to be there to wear their hat or their uniform or whatever it is these days. But I just like seeing the camaraderie and the spectacle of it. It's fun to have a little break in the middle of the season and to see a game where, maybe guys aren't going 100%, but it's still cool to see all the greats or all the very good players on one field. And sometimes it's some of the guys going out of the game and then some of the young stars, and just seeing them kind of mixed together is a whole lot of fun. It reminds me back in the day of Cal Ripken Jr. and A-Rod on the same infield and that sort of thing. I just like seeing baseball get national appeal in a way that it doesn't really get the rest of the season, even though, you got Sunday Night Baseball and MLB Network covering games. The appeal of an All-Star game just seems to kind of outweigh that by a large margin for me.
Yeah, especially when you've got beautiful weather. We know we're in the dog days of summer, and I recently have been to Coors Field watching the Dodgers and Rockies and watching just Shohei Ohtani and how polarizing of a player he really is. When you get a player like that from the first to the last at bat of the night, to have the ability to have fans just stand up, pulling out their phones, taking pictures of videos, I think it's just, remarkable. But when you have them in like an all-star setting where there's more all-stars on that field, and even for some that you maybe never heard of, that could very much be an impactful player, whether with their current clubs or maybe sometimes these players get moved up and they're an impact elsewhere. So as we kind of get into, because we know this month is always All-Star month and then the trade deadline month, has there been any reports or any rumored buzzes that you've been kind of hearing about that we may potentially see with the Minnesota Twins come the trade deadline?
See, the trick with the Twins is that this particular brain trust is pretty mum on rumors. There's teams and certain agencies, as far as agents, where the rumors will spread, whether they're true or false, just to kind of drum up interest, drum up page views, whatever. With the Twins, you basically have to keep it simple. What do they need? Well, another starter would be nice. They've had some success with Simeon Woods Richardson, who started here against the Tigers, and they've had some success, with the guys at the top that they kind of expected to, with Joe Ryan, and Pablo Lopez has been really uneven, but I still feel like he's going to be right there at the end of the day. But, replacing the innings that Sonny Gray threw has been a patchwork thing. Hopefully they can find somebody to do that by hook or by crook. And I think by doing that, you improve the rest of your bullpen and the rest of your team kind of as a result. You shorten the game, so you use fewer relievers in big spots. And there's, less pressure for your offense to have to score runs late if you have a good pitching performance. And, if you can jump out to a 3-0, 4-0 lead, that's a lot easier to play through late in games than white knuckling it every single night. So the way the offense has been going great of late certainly has been helpful as pitchers have, just kind of settled in. Bailey Ober had the complete game against the A's on the last roadie there. And so I would like to see another starter. A bunch of people want relievers, but they have Justin Topa and Brock Stewart both seemingly on the way back. So I don't know if a reliever trade is in the mix, especially too. Jorge Lopez was kind of a cautionary tale there. A couple of those guys are in the big leagues with the Orioles right now. And so you kind of look at that and say, maybe reliever trades aren't really all they're cracked up to be. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. But if they could get even just a stable starter, I look at someone like Paul Blackburn, if he's healthy from the A's. If the Mets go into sell mode, which I don't think they will because they've been playing really well, Luis Severino could be in play. But those kinds of guys, not superstars, not someone who has to start game one for you in the playoffs, but someone you trust to be a bulk guy. If you go, 3 innings with a guy in the playoffs one time through the order, it's got to be that kind of guy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Especially if you can get somebody that's on like a low market deal, but yet it's friendly enough that they can come in and be very impactful. I mean, we've seen this happen multiple times where guys didn't have, the contract yet, or their 1-year rentals by that point before their next contract payday comes in. So we've seen that happen, and there's been a lot of big time hits. So final question before letting you go, because we know that I love the second half of baseball. I think it's the most competitive, and we know this for sure because you go through the fun months of March, April, May to about June. By the time you get into the months of July, August, September, and being prepared for October, you start really seeing the identities of a lot of these franchises really kind of come together. Mm-hmm. So, given the circumstances with the way the AL Central is shaped, we know the White Sox ain't going nowhere. We know the Detroit Tigers are certainly up in rebuild mode. So that only leaves the Guardians, the Twins, and the Royals, that the Royals have been kind of scrappy up to this point. Yep. So how do you think, give or take, and depending on what the trade deadline gives, going into the second half of baseball, this is going to be some pretty competitive stuff in this division, right?
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think the Royals have been out a little over their skis this year, but obviously our team on the upswing has some really nice young players in Bobby Witt Jr., Vinny Pasquantino, and then some veteran guys, Salvador Perez and the like. Seth Lugo has been incredible. And so I think that the pieces are kind of like the skeleton is there for the Royals to be a good team moving forward, but I think they probably bow out sometime in August to the point where, I mean, at the same time, because of all the wild cards and so few teams over 500, they could still be in that mix. But I just think as things stand right now, the Twins and Guardians will pull away. The Twins being winless against the Guardians is certainly basically the divider between them right now. Coming into play on Tuesday, they were 6 games out, and going 0-5 against the team is going to do that to you. So it'll be interesting to see how they fare in those games remaining. I think the Guardians also have played out a little over their skis as well, but that's easy for me to say. I thought the Twins played pretty disappointing baseball to start. They were 7-13 through the first 20, and then since then they have like the best record in the AL, or one of the best records in the AL. So they're playing a lot better of late, but when you dig a hole, it's really hard to fill it back in. I'm hopeful the Twins can do that, but so far it's an uphill battle, and they're still trying.
Man, good stuff. Brandon, appreciate you coming on by, man, especially talking with baseball and the Minnesota Twins. Where can people find you to really get locked in and tune in with the Minnesota Twins this year?
I have a Substack called Access Twins, so accesstwins.substack.com, or just look up the Locked On Twins podcast wherever you get podcasts, or on YouTube, but we'd love to have you on.
There you go, guys. So appreciate you jumping up on by. By the way, happy 4th of July weekend to you, my friend. Hope you have a safe and a very great holiday as well. And we'll see what the second half really has in store for the Twins this year. Take care, my friend.